All right, I think we're live. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to Makers Row Live. My name is Carl, and today we are here with Pamela Capalad, who is Brunch and Budget. So, very exciting. So this week is Small Business Week here at Makers Row. We're going to celebrate some of the small businesses that are on the platform and kind of just the idea of starting your own business, which is kind of perfect because you started your own business.
Yeah.
And so if you want to start off by saying a little bit about your background, what Brunch and Budget is, and
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everybody. So Brunch and Budget was a happy accident, I should say. I was a literature major, and I randomly took a summer job teaching financial literacy camps for kids, and I was like, holy shit, this changed my life.
Yeah.
This is my new life's work, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to learn everything I can about finance and go back and teach kids about money, right? And then along the way, I found out that a lot of my friends had no idea what to do with their money either. And they were scared to talk about it. And that's where Brunch and Budget came from, is for some reason things are easier when you're drinking a mimosa.
yeah.
Yeah, so really Brunch and Budget is literally like we talk about your finances over meal, over food, over drinks, whatever it is, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And what it's become is really like this place to break bread and share some common ground and be able to really dig into a conversation that's usually very difficult and stressful to have in a way where you feel comfortable and empowered.
Yeah. There's no less low pressure situation than brunch.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And is there kind of like a specialization that you specialize in? Do you, I think you work a lot on more millennials and
I guess so. I do work with a lot of millennials, probably because I am one.
Yeah.
I also find that I work with a lot of freelancers and a lot of artists, a lot of creative people, and also just a lot of young professionals who are figuring out how to combine finances with their significant other for the first time. That's a big thing. And I feel like I have also worked with a number of people who work full-time jobs and want to be full-time freelancers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys can ask questions on YouTube, Facebook, or
anything.
And if you got a text alert from us and that's why you're here, you can email or you could text back to that number and then ask us a question that way. So there's a lot of ways to ask questions. So go
ask
at it.
all the questions.
Exactly, ask all the questions. So, but I'll start off with one of my own. So I think a lot of people tuning in are probably, the first question is going to be, I want to start a business. How do I start saving?
Right.
So what would you suggest?
Yeah, totally. And that's often the number one question that I get. And I think it's a question of, one, figuring out what your actual expenses are right now and figuring out how much less you could live on. So I didn't make this up, but it's called minimum viable income or ramen profitable. But basically, it's important to know how much you actually need every single month to live. And that, cut out the coffees, cut out the manicures. It was hard for me too. I had to do it. But cut out the things where you're like, you know what, I could be okay without this for 6 months, right? And so what is that number? And then multiply that by 6, and that's your goal number for quitting. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So basically, you just have to figure out how much you can live on a minimally.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, honestly, if you're not happy at your job, you're probably spending a lot of money because you're like, I deserve it. I had a hard week. Oh my God, my job's so awful. I'm just going to go out and buy another coffee or go to happy hour or all of these things that you're probably spending money on to fill the void of, this actually really sucks and I want to distract myself from it, right? Yeah. And so when you have a goal to quit this job, then the way that you think about spending your money totally changes. And it becomes much easier to save when you understand, one, that you have this number that you're trying to get towards, and two, that you have given yourself a deadline.
Is there, let's say you wanted to start an apparel brand, is there kind of a first kind of purchase or a first expense that you have to be expecting to kind of reach and make a goal for?
I think especially with apparel, I don't know too much about the process necessarily. That's what Makers Row is for. But I think
Get that plug in.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's really important to understand what it will take to make the first product. Understand what the costs are. Understand how to create samples, how much that will cost for you. Understand from forward to back, what will it cost to make 10 of these? What will it cost to make 100 of these? And I feel like, especially if you're just starting off, Etsy is probably a good place to test your market. Like if you're not ready to manufacture and you just have an idea, it's not a business yet.
Yeah.
It's just an idea and it's just an experiment. And that's really why I think you should start if you're really just starting out, is what is the least amount of money you can actually spend on this thing, and what is the least amount of money you can spend to test the idea and to market it.
Yeah. So kind of testing on Etsy without actually having the business around it, just the product on it.
Yeah, exactly. Because right now, if you have one idea for one thing, then just see if someone comes across it and if they buy it, or wear it somewhere and see if people comment on it.
Okay. So we got our first question from Allegra via email. So what do you think about Kickstarter or online funding platforms? Do you leave your product exposed to people who may steal your idea?
Ooh, so that's interesting. I feel like that, one, if you are the creative person, and I've been told this myself because I have actually had people steal my ideas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the reality is there's always more ideas. If you are the actual creator and you are the actual person, there will always be more ideas, and you will always be iterating, and you will always be improving on whatever you're making. So I wouldn't even worry too much about that, and I know the reality is that it's more likely that no one will care. I know this sounds harsh. It's more likely that no one will care than that someone's going to try and steal it. Because the other thing, too, is the reason why nobody's doing what you're doing is because they don't want to.
Yeah.
It's fucking hard. Ooh, can I curse?
No, go ahead.
Okay,
go
cool.
ahead.
It's hard. It's hard for them, and it's easy for you. So stealing someone's idea, I feel like, is actually much more difficult than people think it is. In terms of Kickstarter and Indiegogo for exposure, I feel like Kickstarter is the perfect thing for testing out products. I think people use it for a lot of other reasons, but I think Kickstarter is designed for, hey, I want to test my idea and I want to put it out to a market and I want to get pre-sale, so I know how many I should make and I know if I should even make this in the first place.
Yeah. So it's almost, because Kickstarter is not, the store exactly. It's testing if people actually want it and pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that I really like about the way Kickstarter is structured is, if not enough people buy it for you to be able to afford to make it, then they get their money back.
Yeah.
Because I've also seen situations where people raised $40,000 when they needed $70,000 and they couldn't do anything because they needed $70,000.
Yeah.
Right? So I think Kickstarter is a great platform for that.
And I think going off that, Matthew, our CEO, actually just shared with us a story about the fidget cube.
Fidget cube!
Yeah.
Yes, I just saw one of those in person recently.
Really?
Yeah, I know.
They're cool. But there was a story about how they got so many more pre-orders than they thought that they didn't logistically know how they could handle it.
Oh, wow.
So it's a good testing platform to figure out how much you're gonna be into this, how much you actually need to invest into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next question, which is also from Katie from email, or not also Katie. Katie's a separate person. What are some creative ways to earn side money to support your business? Oh
yeah, well, there's so many new ways now. I mean, I feel like there are so many platforms where you can just do a side hustle. And it's also a really great way to test your idea. So we already mentioned Etsy. So that's a great way to test your idea and make money on the side. We all know the Ubers and the Lyfts, and you can do that too if you want to, if it gets to that. But the other way too, I feel like if you have other skills like Thumbtack. Have you ever been on Thumbtack?
No, I haven't.
Thumbtack and TaskRabbit, they're both similar. But if you have services that you want to offer, or that you're able to offer, Thumbtack is a website where people can go looking for things. And we just used Thumbtack because we needed someone to break open our wall, basically. And look for something behind there. And so we just put out a bid, and qualified people reached out to us and they told us how much they cost, and we said yes or no. And you get to make your rate both on TaskRabbit and on Thumbtack. So if you have, and it's all kinds of stuff, you don't have to be necessarily a handy person. I've seen stuff on there like grocery shopping or organizing closets, or so if there's interest that you have that you feel like other people would pay for, I would check out sites like that. And you may or may not get your rate. That's the thing to look out for. It's more of here's a way to make money while I try out an experiment and try out a platform. Another really great site is Fiverr. Fiverr with 2 R's. And that's, again, you're not necessarily going to get your rate, but I mean, I just heard from Fiverr that they had their first $1 million year someone on Fiverr made $1 million
What?
writing resumes.
That is crazy.
Writing resumes, y'all. Yeah.
Writing resumes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and she's made $1 million this last year on Fiverr.
Crazy.
So it could be really lucrative, especially if you
Yeah.
figure out a system for it, and you really find a match between what you can do and the audience that needs it.
Yeah.
And that's what these platforms are for too.
Mm-hmm. And especially if you're a creative, you're bound to have some talent that is
Yeah,
bound
exactly.
to use for someone else's stuff. So next question. Oh, I lost it. Oh, there we go. On Facebook, Jessica Lima. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Jessica.
How do you determine the right price for a product?
Ooh, okay. So I probably have a
So
bit.
now-
Yes. Well, part of it, especially for products, is you do have to figure out what your break-even point is. So you do have to figure out what the cost of goods are, and that's something that's sort of a little more complex between pricing a product and pricing a service. Is you do have to figure that out, and then I would figure out honestly, because what I did when I priced my product is I started out charging $20 a month. I didn't think anyone would pay me.
That is crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't charge that anymore. But here's the thing about pricing a product is go with something, think about what you're comfortable with, increase it a little bit more than that, and test it. And then guess what? You can always change it. I gave myself a rule that I was going to raise my rates every time I got X number of clients. And what you can do is say, every time I've sold X number of products, I'm going to raise my rates.
Oh, that's a great
I'm going to raise the cost of it. So that way, it's a way to kind of dip your toes in and see what the market will bear without overpricing it or underpricing it and then feeling like you failed on either end.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So also part of her question was, do you roll in the costs of sampling design into the price of product? So I guess, would you roll in overhead into your...
I feel like it depends on what stage you are. I think that probably in the later stages it would make sense to do that. But I'd say in the early stages I would consider that as part of the investment.
Okay.
Because right now you're still experimenting with pricing and it's kind of part of the startup costs. Like the startup cost of running a business, and especially a business that's product based, is how much is it going to cost to make this prototype or make samples.
Yeah, I think actually another good question that we got from last time, and speaking about overhead, is when do you, how much do you pay yourself?
Yeah.
When do you get a co-working space? When do you, and you just hired someone recently, so you kind of have went through this too. So when do you hire someone?
Right, and I feel like all those questions, it all depends, and it can be answered by, I will send this spreadsheet to you so you can send it out to everybody.
Yeah.
But I highly recommend doing 12-month cash flow projections and seeing if it works and seeing how it works. So I did this for my business in the very first year. I was working with a business coach and he insisted that I do this. And I said, but what do you mean? None of these numbers are going to be real. They're going to be fake. I'm making them up. And that's true. You're going to be making them up. They are not real, but they're your best guess. So if you have a product and you tell yourself, I think I can sell 10 of these a month at this price, right? Project it out over 12 months and say you want to increase it 10% every single month, right? So next month you're going to sell 11, the next month you're going to sell whatever that number is. And you're going to project that out over the year and you're going to see how much you're going to be making within the year. And then the second half of the cash flow projections is your expenses. And the expenses are super important. One is the cost of goods, but also the operating costs. So one thing for me is in my first year, I really wanted a co-working space. Really badly. Visited everyone in New York, researched it. I put it in my cash flow projections, and no matter what I did, it didn't work. It straight up didn't work. I had to work from home. And the numbers told me the way that I had to go. The numbers told me the truth, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I did that. And even though I cried a little bit about it, y'all, I'm so glad because I'm sure that line item alone just saved my business the first year. Just knowing that.
You can't always have the flashy things right away.
Yeah, and it's a question of do you need it now or do you just want it now? And I just wanted it. I wanted to feel like a freelancer grown up, you know? I want to go. I still want to go into work every day, but on my own terms and where there's free coffee and shit. So, but yeah, I think it's really important to understand what your costs are ahead of time, and it's more important to get a sample out than to be able to pay for a co-working space.
So Ozma, I believe that's how you say your name, from
Hi,
email.
Ozma.
She said, what financial strategies can be used to avoid failures for the business? It's kind of a broad question,
Ooh,
but
yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know if you could ever really avoid failure, but you can probably mitigate your risk a little bit. I think part of what tends to make businesses fail is being in a place of desperation. And so this is why it's super important to not only have the cash flow projections, but also have some kind of savings cushion. And whether that savings cushion is in the form of literal, like I accumulated a pile of money and now I'm going to be okay for 6 months to a year, or it's I have another stream of income that I'm going to be able to tap into while I try this other business, then that's another way to do it. But I think building the runway and being able to operate in a place of creativity and taking out the stress and pressure of needing to make that sale is a good way to situate yourself so you have more time to actually run the business. And you're going to make mistakes and you are going to fail along the way, but in terms of like realizing that you need to quit, you can extend that time period just by taking some financial steps, including again saving, having a runway, having another source of income, and also the cash flow projections will give you an idea of what goals you really need to hit. I feel like when people don't do cash flow projections, and I feel like most people don't. I feel like I got really lucky by having a business coach just be like, no, you have to do this. And I'm telling you that now.
And I was going to say that's you.
Yeah, I'm telling you that now. And the reason why is because the cash flow projections will tell you whether or not this could actually work before you actually put any money into it. You're not going in blind. You're going in and you're saying, hey, I can make this much in a year on this product or this idea, which means I also have to side hustle X amount of money, and I also have to, go to X amount more networking events and meet X amount more people to hit that number. And also maybe you can't quit your job yet. Yeah. Maybe you take a part-time job on the side. So it'll help you fill in the income gaps while you're getting this idea off the ground.
Is it okay to use credit to, fund your business or, kind of extend that runway?
Yeah, I think I wrote a Maker's Row article about that, another plug. But it really depends. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think one thing to keep in mind is that interest is not good and interest is not bad. It's just interest. And really, interest is just you buying yourself time. So it's one thing to run up credit card debt because you're living off your credit cards. And it's another thing to use credit card debt strategically and understand that the debt that you put yourself in, when you're going to get out of it, is an important thing to think about, one. Okay. And also what you're using it for and how it's going to grow your business. So credit card debt is a risk, and it is a much bigger risk than something like a personal loan or a business loan, just because the interest rates are insane. Yeah. And so paying that off could take forever. But if you have an understanding of how much you're going to borrow, what the interest rate is, and the actual amount that you can put towards it every single month, so you have a deadline for when it's going to get paid off, then it could be a really amazing tool to be able to get a business started, especially if you can't get a personal loan or a business loan. Cool.
So Sarah Jacobelli, I believe.
Oh my God! Hi, Sarah!
What's up? And so next question is, and so if you're just joining us, you could ask questions on YouTube, Facebook, just go through all the cameras, Instagram,
email, text message, carrier pigeon.
Yeah, exactly.
We're right in front of a window if you want to skywrite to us.
But don't come to our office. So if you got a text from us, you could just text us back and we'll get a question from there too. So at HNL Baby Co. from Instagram says, where do you find a good business coach?
That's a tough question. I feel like, my business coach is not doing business coaching.
Which is kind of like a personal mentor? Or?
Yeah, a personal mentor, and we were trading services early on. But, I wish I had a good answer for you. I'm sorry. The thing that I would watch out for, I should say, what to look out for in terms of finding a bad business coach is, one, your business coach should not be calling themselves a life coach, because that's not what you're looking for. That's a really important thing to do. Two is see if your business coach has actually started and run successful businesses themselves. I feel like it's really hard to be a business coach when your business is being a business coach. So that's another thing to look out for and another flag when you're talking to somebody. Yeah. And two, coaching is so personal that it's very, very important that you interview multiple people. And you interview multiple people, you have an idea of what you're looking for and what your outcome is going to be. And when you talk to them, have a clear idea of like what exactly you want to get out of this relationship. Because you don't want to necessarily have a business coach forever. You may need a business coach in the beginning stages, and then you may need them when you need to go to the next level, and then the next level after that, and it might be a different business coach every single time. One thing that I would recommend also is, so I'm in a number of mastermind groups, both within my industry and also with people who are not in my industry, but we just like we are on the same vibe basically. And so if you want to get peer support and peer ideas, it's a really great way to do it. Just ask a few people who you admire, who you respect, and who may or may not be in the same industry as you, but you feel like has a similar mindset to you, and see if they're willing to get together either via video chat. I mostly meet with my mastermind groups via video chat, either via video chat or even in person sometimes. And you'd be surprised what comes out of those conversations. And I'm a big believer in them, and that's why I think I'm in like 3 of them right now. Just because I like to get different perspectives from different people, and we meet in varying degrees. But I feel like I get perspective from people in my field, so I understand what they're thinking and what's new and what's trending. And I also get perspective from people outside of my field, because finance, if you don't do that, is so insular. And I feel like all industries are like that, where if you don't talk to people outside of your field, they're your customers, right?
Yeah.
Your customers are not going to all be in your field, and hopefully they're not. And so by getting inside perspective from someone who's totally objective, who has no incentive one way or the other to actually hope that your business succeeds or doesn't, except for that they like you and want to help you, then it can really be a great way to keep you motivated and also fight the feeling of like loneliness as an entrepreneur and a freelancer.
Yeah, you don't want it to be your best friend who's going to sugarcoat everything.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so...
And they're already going to do that anyway, so...
Yeah, so you don't need to ask. Okay, so Katie from email, again, says, any personal budget tips when you're bootstrapping a startup?
Are they personal budget tips or business budget tips?
Personal.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I think that it's going to be more important than ever to track your personal expenses. More important than ever to figure out where your money's actually going. If you've never done that before, maybe because you have a steady paycheck every 2 weeks and, you know, the money comes in and it goes out, but it always comes back in again. That's not going to be the case when it comes to you as a freelancer. And so if you've never tracked your expenses before, I would start doing that now, even before you quit, even before you go full time, because understanding where your money is going means that you have an awareness that you didn't have before. You have an awareness of what you want to keep in there. You have an awareness of what you want to cut. That minimum viable income number that I was talking about before suddenly becomes really clear.
Yeah.
And I think that it doesn't matter necessarily what you spend your money on. I'm a big believer that where you spend your money is a representation of what you value. And actually tracking your spending and knowing where it goes is the first step to really doing that and understanding that.
Yeah.
And when you start aligning your spending with your values, then maybe you don't have to track it as much. But if you've never done it before and you're about to embark on, you know, this journey of becoming an entrepreneur, on the personal side, that's the first thing I would do. I don't care where the money goes, but I want you to care where the money goes. Yeah.
That's such good advice. That like touched me. I was like, oh wow, now I have to look at my spending habits. So Ed Faton,
Hi Ed.
He kind of, I guess this a little bit of comment. He says, wouldn't you say you could find a business coach in these mastermind groups or fashion hubs?
Oh, like could you find somebody within that? Most likely not. If you're speaking to your peers, you kind of want your business coach to be
who you want to become.
Yeah, a little bit ahead of you more. The mastermind groups I feel like are great for peers where, you know, maybe people are kind of all... I've found the best mastermind groups, if they're in your industry, are people who are all kind of in the same place. So they're all kind of in the same stage in their business. Like, maybe someone's a little bit ahead, maybe someone's a little bit behind, but they've been in the business for about the same amount of time.
Yeah.
They have about the same amount of revenue. Maybe they make the same amount of products, or they deal with the same kinds of issues. Because I've talked to people where mastermind groups haven't worked out because one person ended up asking all of the questions because they were so new, and everyone else was kind of mentoring them. And so that's what you want to be careful about. And with a business coach, you do want to be able to have someone who you can ask all of the questions to.
So mastermind group are your peers.
Yes.
Who you are currently or as a business, and then mentors who you want to become.
Yes.
All right, perfect.
Totally. That's a great distinction, yes.
So let's see. More questions. Or where they are. There's so many places that they're coming from, so to figure out where to go.
I love it. All the questions.
I guess a good question would be, so there's a certain point where you would want to grow your business, maybe kind of, so we talked about, hiring an employee or like getting a new space, but is there any advice for when you want to scale your business? Is there kind of a cycle where you want to build that runway, or is, kind of starting to get more funding to scale your business outside of just the revenue that you're bringing in from your product?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm kind of in the middle of that myself because I did just hire somebody and it's full-time for the first time. And one of the things that I'm nervous about is I have these projections and they look really great, and even if 70-80% of it came true, I'd be totally fine. But of course the worst case scenario side of my brain is like, oh my god, but what if it all explodes, right? And so I feel like, again, not to be a broken record, but go back to your cash flow projections, and by the time you're 2-3 years into your business and you need to start making those decisions about scaling, then you'll be able to see the gaps more clearly because you have revenue from before. You have an idea of what your realistic projections can be. So you're in an interesting place when it comes to your cash flow projections where it's like, oh, this might actually come true this year.
Yeah.
Like, this could happen. And then you can see if there's any gaps there. Because the thing that I would caution you about funding and getting more funding is it's another person to answer to. Just period. It's another person who has a stake in it, who may or may not understand it the same way that you do. And if you don't want to, if you don't want to have to answer to them and make decisions considering what they would kind of come back with, then I would think twice about it. Especially if the revenue is enough that you can still save to scale.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not planning on getting investors into my business, and I know it's different because it's a service-based business. But I do know financial planning firms who will merge with other companies for their resources and things like that. And if you can keep it as independent as possible for as long as possible and be able to give up control on your terms, I think that is the important thing to figure out when you figure out your cash flow projections.
Are there any mistakes that kind of, in addition to that, are there any mistakes that you see people making with money commonly as a small business?
Yeah, I think we like to get ahead of ourselves. I think, just going back to the co-working space scenario, I know that I've had to temper myself personally when you see revenue success and you're like, holy shit, this is working. Then you want to go faster than you should be going. And I think those are some of the mistakes that I've seen, and those are some of the mistakes that I talk clients through not making, is hold on, these cash flow projections do look good. Let's see what it could look like if it was only 70%, or if it was only 60%, or what about if it was 80%, or what about if it was 110%, right? And so I think even though you don't know what the future is going to look like, if you have an understanding of what all the potential scenarios are, then you can avoid a lot of those mistakes. But I do think I see a lot of clients, and myself included, just wanting to go full steam ahead. I think the other thing too is, and I haven't quite experienced this myself personally, but scaling too fast, again, going back to going too fast, is scaling too fast because or having to scale too fast because you had no idea that the business was going to grow like this, and not putting the right people in place early on to be able to help you do that. So one thing that we were just talking about right before this is when I was hiring someone and I first started looking for a full-time employee, I was so sure that I wanted to hire another person who was eventually going to become an advisor, right? And who was eventually going to be client-facing and basically be another me. And in the search process, I was talking to my husband about it, and he was like, are you sure you need another you? What would that mean for you running the business? like, that means you would still have to do everything, right? And I was like, oh yeah, that would kind of suck.
Yeah.
So I actually went a totally different direction and ended up hiring someone who could still do client service, but who was very strong in operations. And that meant that I could focus more on what I was good at, which was selling and bringing in business. And she could actually build out the business structure to be able to allow me to hire someone who could become an advisor one day.
Yeah.
And I think I was honestly like so blinded and hell-bent because that's how I'd seen other advisors do it. Other advisors hire people to eventually do what they're doing because they're like, that's how I'm going to grow, is I'm going to multiply myself. And then what I've found is I really need someone to complement me. And I think if you find a way to hire that person early on and kind of bite the bullet a little bit, your projections might be less than if you hired another you and they grew revenue just as fast as you did and sell just as fast as you did. But if you build that foundation early, then I feel like when you are at the point where things are exploding all of a sudden, then you're actually ready to scale.
Because you actually have the rock in place.
Yes, exactly.
So Park and Crest from Instagram says, what if you have multiple creative ideas? Is it okay to test each one, or is it best to test each idea or to pick one and focus?
Oh, that's such a tough question. I think it all depends. I think if your multiple ideas complement each other and if they kind of can feed into each other, then it might make sense to test them all at once and see how they can all work together and see if you can build multiple revenue streams. Because if you can make that work, then that definitely reduces your risk in terms of like putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Putting all your eggs in one product. In general, though, and I've made this mistake too, trying to test multiple service ideas at once, I'd say it makes way more sense to focus on the one idea that you feel like can pop. And what's important is, yes, you want to keep going and see if it works and keep making sure it works. And, failure doesn't happen unless you stop and whatever. But you should also give yourself a deadline. And you should also tell yourself, okay, if I don't hit this or if this doesn't happen by this date, then I'm going to move on to the next idea.
So we're going to take only a couple more questions. We'll wrap it up soon. So Jessica Lima asked, how do you determine how much product you can sell in a month to be able to start your 12-month projections?
Yes, especially if you're just starting off. Hi, Jessica. Especially if you're just starting off, I would do multiple cash flow projections. I would give yourself an idea, and the spreadsheet has formulas, and you can make copies of it and whatever you need to do. But I would give yourself an idea of, okay, so if I really hustled and blew this out of the water, what could it look like, right? And also think about, okay, if I only sold like 3 of these, what would that look like, right? And so I feel like I would play around with the numbers more. It's hard to really know what to start with. And really, like, for me, for instance, I told myself, like, I could probably get 2 clients a month or 5 clients a month. And I looked and saw what the cash flow projections looked like with 2 and looked like with 5. And it worked with 2. So I was like, all right, let me go with 2. Now, there are some people who are really motivated. So I'm the opposite. I'm like, I want my shit to come true. And I feel really bad when it doesn't. So I kind of shoot on the low end. And if things go well, it's like a nice surprise for me. I have clients and I have friends who are like, no, I really need the high numbers to motivate myself and to push myself to hit those goals. Then that is probably the direction that I would choose to go in when it comes to figuring out how much product you want to sell.
Let's see. Check all the places.
There's got to be an app to consolidate all the apps, right?
Someone out there.
Come on, someone listening. New business idea.
Exactly. There you go. We just gave you one. It's for free. I guess let's finish out with one of my questions. So it'll be a little broad, but do you have any tips for trying to reach those goals? To reach your
Yes. Oh my God, I do. My main tip, I'm so excited. Well, here's the thing. Cash flow projections mean nothing if you do not manage them and track them. And if you do not put your actual numbers in and compare them against your goal numbers. So that's one thing, is it's super important to track. Again, track where your money's coming in and when it's coming in. But the big thing is, I feel like when people think about income, it's kind of scary because you're like, I don't know when someone's going to buy something or if someone's going to say yes to me or if I'm going to land that gig or whatever it is, right? You don't know that. And that's just the reality. It's the unknown, right? So you can't control that, so don't try.
Yeah.
What you can control is you can increase the odds that more people will come to you and more people will say yes. And that comes in the form of action steps. And so what you need to do is look at those cash flow projections that you made and actually create action steps on the back end and test them out. So for instance, one of the things that I really wanted to test out, and I was so sure this was going to work when I was getting clients, is I was so sure that I reached out to a bunch of finance blogs and I was like, and freelance blogs, and I was like, I'm going to guest blog. And that's how I'm going to get all of my clients, right? And so my action steps were to reach out to 5 bloggers a week and email them and see if I can get on some of them. And as the months went by and as I was tracking my cash flow and I was just tracking where the business was coming from, I realized that none of the business was coming from guest blogging. And so I was like, okay, I think I need to stop guest blogging. Yeah. And if I didn't track where the business was coming from and if I didn't take that action step and take away the emotion from it, because I love writing. I'm a writer. I majored in literature. I still guest blog, but I don't do it now thinking that it's going to be a marketing tool. I do it because I like to disseminate information in that way, right? And so what you need to do is create these action steps and test them out. And you can try one of them at a time, you can try a couple of them at once, and see if they work. Because if I still thought that guest blogging was the only way that I was marketing, and I kept doing it and had no idea where the revenue was coming from, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. I dropped that notion as soon as I realized it wasn't working and moved on to the next thing.
Great. So I think we have one last question from Provide Shop on Instagram.
Hello.
I don't really know. Maybe you'll listen to me. Do you have one business book recommendation to a new company?
Oh my God. I have one that other people have recommended me that I've been meaning to read.
Oh, okay.
It's called The E-Myth, and E stands for entrepreneur. And literally, like multiple people from, I need to just get it now that I'm saying this out loud. Multiple people from multiple industries have told me that this is a must read for entrepreneurs and people who are thinking about wanting to become entrepreneurs. So
E-Myth.
The E-Myth, yes.
The E-Myth.
And there's many revised versions. So
right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, this was great. Thank you so much for coming
in. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everybody. If you have any more questions for Pamela, let us know. Maybe we'll bring her back. So tell everyone where they could find you.
Oh yeah, totally. So brunchandbudget.com. I also host a weekly podcast on personal finance and social justice with my husband Dialect. And that's brunchandbudget.com/podcast. And we are also on iTunes. Just search Brunch and Budget with the ampersand. Twitter at Brunch and Budget. Instagram at Brunch and Budget. If you want to see all the brunches that I eat, they're pretty delicious.
There you go.
Yeah. And Facebook Brunch and Budget. Pretty easy.
Yeah. And she's all over the Makers Row blog, and on. You can also watch her Makers Row Live from last year too on our YouTube page. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy these, and I know we haven't done them often, but if you do, let us know and we'll bring them back more often. So thank you again so much, and bye everybody.
Bye everybody.